All right. Welcome everyone to Brain Northwest's educational programming. Today we have a class titled The Wisdom Years with our lovely teacher, Caterina Turner. She has rich experience working with people living with brain injury and with the veteran community through multiple different positions and jobs, including her current one, where she's working with veteran affairs and supporting first responders and veterans, and has just a beautiful, rich personal experience and style in being able to create a safe space for us to talk about topics that are really important to our hearts and to our minds. And I'm really thankful that you're here again, Katerina. And so I welcome you to take it away.
Thank you, Reggie. I always love your introductions. They're so kind and gracious. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here today. What I want us to do in this time that we do have together is to pay attention almost to the expertise that you've already built. So, kind of the daily, ongoing creative work of adapting to life with a brain injury that you've already been doing, or that you may be learning to do if it is a new injury. Often without anyone really naming it as an accomplishment as it is. So today we're going to walk through how the brain continues to grow and change as you age. And then we're going to talk about ways to sharpen and update the strategies that you've already been using and refining as time has been going on so they keep serving you well in whatever comes next. So I just want to take a moment to kind of share that, of course, the intersection of aging and brain injury might raise some real issues for you, whether that's grief about maybe what shifted, or it could be uncertainty about what's coming, or maybe even some frustration. And it doesn't have to be all doom and gloom, but please note that if that is something that is coming up for you, that is completely okay. I just want to kind of put three principles out on the table up front so we're all working from the same understanding. The first, which I always love to harp on, is that your lived experience is your expert knowledge. And I'll be sharing research today as I usually do, but the deepest understanding in this room is your own experience and it comes from you. Do take what serves you and let the rest go. And you're welcome to engage, like Reggie said, however you feel, whether that's speaking up at the end, typing in the chat, or just listening quietly if you're an introvert like myself. Being here is just absolutely fine. And then the third is, your brain and body, if it tells you to step away, stretch. If you want to close your eyes, you can just sit back, listen to my voice. There's no judgment to go off camera, or even log off if you feel completely spent for the day. That is completely okay too. So just looking here on the left, you've got what experts in aging recommend. So you'll see energy management, structured routines, pacing activities, and using memory tools. And then on the right, it's likely what you've been doing day in and day out since your injury, or again, if it's new, maybe this is something that you're learning to do. So conserving brain injury, following daily schedules, maybe taking some breaks, and using tools to help you remember. So those are the same skills, more or less. So it's almost like you're already an expert when you look at this. And this is something that I always talk about during my trainings is conserving the brain injury and, doing schedules and doing what works best for your brain. So the difference is that the aging experts are recommending these as new strategies, but you've been practicing them daily, hopefully. You're not starting from zero. So you're already bringing this hard-won expertise to the aging process. And that could be, I don't know, the alarms on your phone or the way you organize your mornings. So you're kind of front loading those high energy kind of tasks, or the notebook by the door or the sticky notes on the fridge. Whatever systems that you've built, into your life through trial and error and on hard days. So the question that we're really going to be addressing today is, as your body ages and as energy shifts and new changes start to layer on top of the ones you've already navigated, how do those strategies need to evolve? And that's the thread that we're going to be pulling on together for the rest of our time. So, one of the heaviest questions that comes with aging after a brain injury is the one about where your brain is headed. Am I going to decline faster than everyone else? It's a question that, I've been asked so many times. And, this is always a difficult conversation. And I want to speak to it directly because the answer is more hopeful than you might expect. So I always love talking about this. This slide shows the difference between fear decline and reality. And that dashed line dropping down is what a lot of people imagine is happening. So, kind of like the steep progressive slide or drop off. But the solid line, the one that stays steady across the river, is what the largest study on this topic found. Nearly 16,000 people who participated in the study were followed over time. And for those who had a single brain injury, and I just want to reiterate a single brain injury, not multiple sustained brain injuries, because that may look very different. This one injury may have shifted the starting point or your baseline, yes, but from there, the pace of change looked like everyone else's. So again, the baseline is different, but the pace is the same. So not faster, not steeper, just the normal gradual changes that come with getting older. And there's a second study. I'm going to be referencing all the studies throughout this training. So I just want to prepare you guys. I apologize in advance. I do love my research. So this second study that followed over 11,000 people for 30 years, and it confirmed kind of what we were just talking about. So again, a single brain injury shows a steady trajectory over decades. But it also found something really important about repeated injuries. Multiple brain injuries over a lifetime, can speed things up by more than double, which is roughly equivalent to being nearly 10 years older in terms of brain aging. And I don't want this to scare anyone who may have multiple sustained brain injuries, but it's something to keep in the back of your mind. The real takeaway here is that your baseline is secure and the ground that you're standing on is solid. So it's your primary job going forward to protect that baseline, which means ultimately avoiding another injury, and especially from falls. And that's, something very much within your power. And we're going to talk about how to do that in just a moment. So for anyone with a sustained brain injury, preventing falls is one of the most important things that you can do for your long-term brain health. And not because you're fragile or you're protecting this brain that's already been injured from a second impact. And that is the single most effective way to keep that steady path that we had just talked about, to keep that steady baseline. And the good news is it breaks down into three areas. So first, our first stepping stone here is something very, very simple. Managing your environment. So getting rid of things like throw rugs or trying to put down something grippy underneath. If you absolutely need to have your throw rugs in your home for decor purposes, do get something grippy underneath. Improving the lighting in hallways and bathrooms, and then adding grab bars where needed. And the second, this was something that we were kind of talking about before the training, is movement. Balance and strength, work that doesn't have to be intense. And it could be something like Tai Chi, something soft, maybe twice a week. Or if you're able, maybe doing a chair yoga, or if you need some modified gentle movement, you can do something perhaps in bed. Of course, talk to your doctor about different stretches that you can do. And then the third is keeping your senses, like your vision, your hearing, prescriptions up to date, because the way you perceive depth and distances begin to change over time as you age. And of course, an outdated prescription can increase your risk for additional falls. So we live in a world that treats 20s and 30s kind of as like the peak of happiness. And this is reiterated in social media if you use Facebook or Instagram or even in the news. It's kind of this ongoing, oh, your peak of life, and kind of that you reach 40 and it's all downhill from there. And it's actually quite the opposite. So, researchers tracked thousands of people across the full arc of their lives and measured how they were really feeling at every stage. And they found the exact opposite, which I think is so interesting. Happiness doesn't decline with age, it deepens. And the reason for this is because by the time that adults reach their 70s or even well into their 50s or 60s, only 17% report significant daily stress, and compared to roughly half of adults in their 20s and 30s. So, despite these very real physical changes that do happen with aging, older adults do still report the most satisfying relationships and the most deepest sense of peace and the lowest levels of emotional distress of any age group, which I think is just so profound. So I'm definitely looking forward, I say this humbly, to aging gracefully and finding that inner peace because goodness knows I need it. So really, the finding is so consistent, and it kind of seems a little counterintuitive that researchers named it the aging paradox. And the reason, of course, is that the aging brain is, oh, excuse me, let me go on back. My hand got a little excited there. So aging is, it's kind of counterintuitive. So again, the reason that the aging brain is letting go of what doesn't matter and directing its energy toward what it does. So kind of as you get older, you let go of all the, excuse me, the BS. You kind of just move on, and you crave that deep connection and being present and really looking for emotional meaning over surface level noise and conversations. And you may feel, even now as you begin to age, that you may have a shorter um, kind of a shorter fuse for the surface conversations of, how are you doing today? Oh, I'm doing well. And you hear the voice kind of go up and it's like, oh gosh, I can't continue in this conversation anymore because it feels a little superficial. So as you get older, you do continue to crave those deeper and meaningful conversations. And the experience of navigating something as profound as a brain injury tends to clarify what matters almost with a speed and this depth that ordinary aging takes decades to reach. So, really, the focus and emotional richness that you carry is wisdom that arrived early. And this one was really interesting, and that's the biology of belief. And there's another finding that changed the way that I think about aging. And I wanted to share this because I think it will change the way that you think about it because it kind of changed my perspective. So, a research team at Yale spent decades studying a deceptively simple question. Does the way a person think about their own aging affect how long they live? And you may be thinking, Katerina, this sounds like woo-woo. It doesn't sound, like something for me, but they did. They followed hundreds of people over the course of their lives. And the answer was staggering. So the people who saw their own aging in a positive, strength-based way, who believed this chapter of life still had more to offer, lived an average of 7.5 years longer than those who carried fear and negativity about getting older. 7.5 years. That's craziness. So that's a bigger effect than, keeping your cholesterol low or maintaining a healthy weight, or never smoking. Because sometimes it's very easy when you go to the doctor and he may recommend, a new exercise, and you say, "Oh gosh, I've did it all. I kind of just feel like I'm done." But just really having that growth mindset to keep you going. Um, it's really about reframing perspective if you can. So this is decades of careful research, replicated and expanded through 2026. And then the same team found that even among those who carry a gene that put them at higher risk for memory loss, positive beliefs about aging worked almost kind of like a shield. So lowering their chances of developing dementia, which I think is pretty incredible. So when I say kind of reframing of today's conversation matters and why it's called the wisdom years, I mean it in my bones. And how you choose to see graceful, beautiful aging may impact how long and how well you live. So just food for thought today. And then another idea that I'd like to share is among the most empowering in this conversation, and it's called cognitive reserve. And the simplest way to understand it is as this deep savings account that you have in your brain. Every experience you've ever had, every language you tried to learn, or every book that you've read or listened to, if you're an audio person, if you don't have the attention span to read like me, that's completely okay. Every problem that you work through and conversation, put something new into that account. So over a lifetime, those deposits build up into a kind of resilience that helps your brain find new routes and keep doing its job well, even as the years bring the wear and tear. So, kind of as this slide shows, it's not just one account, it's three. And there's the reserve that you build through learning, through moving your body, and through connection. There's an emotional reserve that you build through managing stress and staying resilient. And then, of course, there's a sensory reserve that you protect by keeping your hearing and your vision as sharp as possible. So, all three of these feed the same root system. So, really just think, your savings account was not frozen the day that your injury happened, no matter how long ago it was, and it didn't stop growing. Your brain is still very much so capable of building those new connections, and that's true throughout your entire life. So even right now, it's getting stronger because you showed up and you're engaged, and I see the chat going, and I love it. So every real conversation and every unfamiliar situation that you navigate, every time you move your body, even if you're just saying, you know what, I'm going to get it today, I'm going to do 5 wall push-ups if you can. That's moving your body, and those are deposits, and your account is always open. So again, kind of piggybacking off the movement we were just talking about. Really, I want to look at the 4 different pillars of, kind of improving quality of life in your wisdom years as we continue to age. And the first of 4 of our pillars is movement. And again, movement can mean so many different things, not going to the gym and training for anything or anything stressful on your body. It could be something in your home, whatever makes you feel good. Gentle physical activity acts like fertilizer for the brain. So it continues to help your brain grow new connections and keep the pathways healthy. I cannot talk today, that are already there. So the guideline on your slide, it says 150 minutes, which seems like a lot. And I know that number can sound intimidating, but really it's about 20 minutes a day. So it could be walking if you're able, gardening, gentle stretching, swimming, again, the modified movement if needed, whatever feels good for your body. And then another interesting, a 2024 international report identified sitting still, I'm sure you guys have already heard this, as the single biggest risk that we can change for long-term brain health. And the bar is lower than most people think. Again, you don't have to break a sweat. You just have to do a little move every day if you can. And pillar 2 goes without saying, restorative sleep. And there's definitely a difference between sleep and restorative sleep. And the reason is, it matters so much and it's beautifully simple. Just while you sleep, your brain runs kind of its own cleaning crew. During the night, your brain physically flushes out the waste and buildup from that day's work. So it's kind of like a nightly deep clean that only happens when you're asleep and only in that deep sleep. So if you cut that process short, or if it keeps getting interrupted, that buildup remains over time and it begins to take a toll throughout the day. So you might find the next morning, again, that fuse is short. You may have more difficulty finding words. It's kind of this cascade of events of, man, I'm just feeling really off today. And it could be something as simple as that restorative sleep. So for many people with brain injuries, it does matter more because disrupted sleep is so common after an injury, just in and of itself, it's a symptom. And there are variances and perhaps additional comorbidities that may impact a restful night's sleep, such as, hormonal changes for women, or sleep apnea, or having an insomnia diagnosis, different medications. So that can be navigated with your primary care provider. And if you want to aim for about 7 to 9 hours of sleep, if you can, for some that may sound very lofty, but just really try to get that deep sleep. So things that can help include a cool room, maybe putting a fan in there if you can, consistently going to bed, waking up at the same time, and then having a dark room. And for the sake of safety purposes, if you're unable to keep a dark room, if say you need a night light, if you get up to reduce falls, which I'm an advocate for, I absolutely have a night light because I wake up very disoriented and I am a risk to myself. So I do recommend maybe a sleep mask, a nice soft sleep mask. You can make nighttime feel almost like a luxurious routine, maybe going to a spa if you get like a really nice nighttime routine of maybe a skincare foundation or going through the routine of dropping your AC if you can or turning on that fan, but just making it feel very relaxing and almost spa-like to help you sleep throughout the night. And again, we kind of touched on this earlier, social connection. So a full brain workout is disguised as a conversation. And this is 110% true, or it is for me anyway. Um, when you're in a real conversation with someone, and when I mean like a real conversation, you're engaging, you're actively listening, you don't have your phone in your hand, you're not watching TV. But when you're talking and intentionally listening, your brain is doing an enormous amount of work at once. So you're kind of reading emotion, you're reading those social cues, you're choosing words or trying to find words, paying attention, you're remembering context or feeling empathy. So, all of these things happening at once is one of the best exercises that your brain can get all day, especially as we continue to age. And on the flip side, it's just as powerful. Being isolated is as hard on the brain as smoking is on the lungs. So, brief daily interactions matter, and you don't need to pack a social calendar. It could be a brief conversation with your mailman or, as you're walking outside, but just having these short daily bursts of micro interactions, they all count. And being here right now, listening to me talk a million miles a minute definitely counts, even if you choose to participate at the end or not. And I'm so happy that you're here. And this one is often overlooked. We hear it all the time. Oh, eat healthy, nutrition, the brain gut connection, all of these things. But it is so very important. Feeding your brain and challenging it. On the nutrition side, the research points consistently towards what's called a Mediterranean style way of eating. There have been so many fad diets, keto, which I love, especially for me for losing weight, but also there's plenty of different studies for that if you want to go research that. But Mediterranean, eating berries, leafy greens, healthy fats, olive oil, nuts, fish if you don't have a fish allergy. You don't need to really overhaul your kitchen. It's very simple. It's whole foods. A lot of it you can get, for cheap at a farmer's market. It's something that you can look into. But these foods give your brain kind of the raw materials that it needs to stay healthy and to repair itself. And then on the novelty side, like we had mentioned previously, with our root system, continuing to learn these new things or read or try something unfamiliar, that's what keeps your brain building those new connections. So it doesn't really have to be anything dramatic. You can try a new recipe. If you're anything like me, you might get into recipe ruts where you eat the same thing and your son says, ah, rosemary chicken again, just by the smell of it. So, a really great website that I love is called Skinny Taste. It's free. She has a lot of, different diets up there, different food allergies. It's very organized and easy to use. So that's something that you can check out too. But, something as simple as listening to a different food podcast or learning about different diets that may be of interest to you. Every time your brain has to stretch a little to meet something unfamiliar, it's getting stronger. So, again, you're doing that right now just by being here and taking in all of these new ideas. Or not new ideas, but I hope that some of them are a little bit nuanced to you. And then there's one more piece that I'd like to share, and the one hopefully that will stay with you the longest. Researchers pulled the results of several large, long-running studies and found that people who carry a strong sense of purpose, not productivity, so not chasing titles, to have that sense of accomplishment, but a felt sense that their days had meaning, live measurably longer. So it's something like 23, I don't have my notes in front of me. It's something like 23% longer to put a number on it. And what purpose looks like at this stage of life is, again, not what our culture usually pictures or presents. You're not building an empire, you're not going back and getting your PhD, or maybe you are, and that would be great if that gives you purpose, whatever gives you that purpose. There's no, wrong way to go about it. But it's about contributing to something beyond yourself. And it's the conversation where you could tell maybe a younger survivor what you wish someone had told you maybe 10 years ago. Or it could be a moment that you share a strategy that took you years to figure out. And you kind of see this person go like, oh, what? Like, oh, that's life-changing. I've never thought about that before. So just the mentoring, storytelling, and showing up with the full weight of everything that you've been through and lived through and letting it mean something to someone else. If that is a way that you would like to give back or have purpose. That's just an example. It could look very differently for you. So the resilience and perspectives that you've built, as the slide says, it's the wisdom the world needs. And if you've ever felt that your experience should count for something, it is the deepest kind of purpose. And pursuing it is one of the most powerful things that you can do for yourself and for the individuals around you. Again, it does not have to be injury related. You can join your community for sense of purpose in varying ways, like volunteering at a local garden or hospital, animal shelter. If you're not opposed to noises, although I know that a lot of noise can maybe be a little disturbing, so maybe something quieter or working with kittens. There's a great website. I'm not sure if they still run it or not. It's called Idealist, and there are different organizations that do post volunteer opportunities, and they could be remote or, whatever works for you or your brain, if that's something that you wanted to explore. So here's your action plan. We've covered a lot of ground today. I did a lot of talking very fast. And so I do hope that this was digestible for you. We've talked about how you're already decades ahead in the skills that matter most for your aging well. We've talked about what the research says about stability after a brain injury and why protecting yourself from falls is so very important. We've explored the aging paradox and why emotional well-being deepens with time. And then we've talked about the power of belief, your brain savings account, and the four pillars that protect you, and the deep value of living with purpose. So we've really, just saying that out loud, oh my goodness, we've we've been through a lot in a short amount of time. So thank you for sing this with me, sing it through. So if you'd like, feel free to choose, anything that you think would be beneficial to where you are in life now. And I'd like you to just sit with it for a little bit. So you can choose one pillar to strengthen. Maybe it's committing to a 15-minute walk or a more consistent bedtime. Two, you can choose a strategy with fresh eyes. So something in your daily life that used to work well and maybe is starting to feel a little bit harder. So we kind of touched on, um, feeling that cognitive decline, like feeling like maybe this is due to me getting older, kind of losing words in that regard. So what can you do to prepare for that? Like, can you bring some scripts or can you give yourself an exit plan when you're feeling overwhelmed? And three, choose one connection to make. So reaching out to a peer, joining a support group, coming to these classes, or sharing something from today with someone in your life. Like Reggie had mentioned previously, you can, send out these classes so you don't have to be burdened with the tax of trying to educate individuals in your life. You can just simply say, hey, here's this great website. They have a lot of great resources. Go check it out. And here are a few things that we kind of reviewed today. If you wanted to dive a little deeper into the research about belief in aging, Dr. Becca Levy's book, Breaking the Age Code, is a beautiful place to start as the researcher behind that 7.5-year finding. Pauline Boss's Ambiguous Loss is powerful for anyone navigating grief that doesn't really have a clear shape. And of course, the Brain Injury Association of America, Brain Northwest, Brain Line are all excellent ongoing resources. And if you want the studies themselves, they're also listed here. And everything that we talked about today is grounded in published peer-reviewed research. So again, you carry the sum of everything that you've navigated and every obstacle that you've worked through. So all of that just built something remarkable inside you, and it doesn't fade with age. Like we mentioned, it deepens. So the wisdom years are the richest, most layered expression of everything you've learned about adaptation and resilience, and the beautiful refusal to stop growing. So thank you all so much for being here today, for your openness, and for bringing everything you carry into this space. Reggie will stop recording and we'll open the floor for any comments or strategies that you'd like to share if you feel comfortable. Again, no pressure if you're an introvert. Feel free to use the chatter or just continue to come back if so you choose. But thank you all.
Thank you, Caterina. I'll stop the recording now.